the ideology of universalism. This is my main argument. The dispute we are confronted with is between those who accept the universalistic interpretation of the world and take it as a normative goal we all should strive to realize, and those who reject it, who see and respect the differences which characterize mankind, who don't want to make all of us uniform, who don't want to bring us all into line, drawn by quasi-progressive and would-be enlightened Western public intellectuals and their fellow travelers in politics on one side, and by obscurantist, pre-modern Oriental traditionalists on the other. Paradoxically, the problem is not only universalism. It may look counterintuitive, but the ideology of universalism has as its inseparable component the ideology of multiculturalism. For some people, to put these two doctrines together may sound rather strange. One of them argues for uniformity, the other for diversity. But they are not exclusive. These two ideologies are mutually connected, if not inseparable. One reinforces the other, and this combination has very problematic consequences. Their original and perhaps meaningful roles have been switched, at least in the West. The ideology of universalism is promoted in international relations, whereas at home the slogan of the day is multiculturalism. At the global level, universalism and uniformity has been preached. At the domestic level, multiculturalism and artificially introduced diversity has been promoted. Both are wrong. It should be the opposite. Homogeneity, maximum homogeneity at home, and diversity in the world. This hypothesis of mine is, at least I hope, relevant for many topics, many other topics. The most pressing one is the debate about a failed project of the EU, of the European Union, but it has a special significance for the topic of this conference, which aims to discuss the East-West communication gap. According to the Universalist doctrine, and the Universalists don't dare formulating it so explicitly, neither the East nor the West in reality exist. The Universalists deny the existence of any meaningful differences between them. There is, according to them, just one world community, one universal parenthood, one unstructured bundle of individuals belonging to the Homo sapiens family. This may be valid at the biological level, but not at any other, especially not at civilizational, cultural, or religious levels. I agree with Huntington's view that people of different civilizations have different views on the relation, I quote, on different views on the relations between God and man, the individual and the group, the citizen and the state, parents and children, husband and wife, as well as differing views of the relative importance of rights and responsibilities, liberty and authority, equality and hierarchy. These differences are the product of centuries. They will not soon disappear, unquote. They can't be, and especially shouldn't be, artificially and violently eliminated. In the Universalist interpretation, East and West are degraded and narrowed to merely geographic notions, as was quoted by Rahat. Francis Fukuyama made this point very explicitly and very arrogantly 25 years ago. I quote, Fukuyama said, "The Orient must learn to be more like the West." Famous statement. East is, according to this way of thinking, just a less developed and less enlightened West, and for that reason the East must be pushed forwards, in quotation marks, forwards to become the full-fledged West. It should be pushed in a friendly or unfriendly manner, peacefully or violently, whether the East wants it or not. It should be done because this is the only way to a better world. I'm afraid to a better world, to a better, brave new world of Aldous Huxley. As a side remark, let me say that this universalist doctrine has become the basis for the problematic and so easily misinterpreted and abused concept of human rights, and for the whole anti-liberal ideology of human rightism. Human rightism has become another false and freedom-endangering utopia. In the prevailing paradigm of thinking and behaving, the true communication and dialogue are not possible. People on both sides speak, but do not listen. We are witnesses of a one-way export of ideas, of values, of culture, of behavioral patterns, of lifestyles on both sides. Many of the recent conflicts and wars worldwide were based on such thinking. The West tried to export democracy without paying attention to the broader civilizational and cultural context. This proved to be not only unproductive, but counterproductive. The same goes more and more for the East these days. Many claims coming from the East have a similar pattern and reflect ambitions of possessing values and truths aiming at general validity. The initial one-sided export of ideas from the West to the East has been in last centuries made possible by the economic, military,
conference
and
in Vienna.
political.
This is multicultural. And I was just listening to famous Mr. Vaclav Klaus, and I'm really glad that I have heard it. May I please ask a question, maybe a little bit tricky, but for me as a Russian person, you know, I've heard what you have said about USSR, Soviet Union. How do you evaluate our policy right now? And what is your view? Is it hopeless situation, or what would you recommend? Not maybe to our president, but to ourselves. What we, I mean, young generation of Russians who are active, who are peer professionals, who can speak everywhere, and we are quite active in international conferences and gatherings and networking. What we can do? Thank you.
This is a question.
Well, I must say that I was giving a speech in Berlin on Friday and Copenhagen on Saturday about the 25 years anniversary of the fall of communism. And I tried to explain the 25 years of doing something with this event. And of course, the first question was about Ukraine. So I came here to speak about East-West relations on the Arab development, communication, I don't know how it is exactly. Again, the first question is about Ukraine. So what should I do? You know, I don't mind. This is for me, this is the real issue of the day. And for me, it is, maybe I look at it, as I said, from Prague, from Central European perspective. So this is, for me, the crucial. Usually I don't have traditional views. I don't buy immediately the headlines in the main media. So I see the situation there really differently. And you ask about Russia. I deliberately and intentionally start to speak about Ukraine. For me, the real problem is Ukraine, the country which has not succeeded in making the necessary post-communist transformation of the whole society, political, social, economic transformation. And the country is really not successful. And the Ukrainian politicians failed to do something what almost all the other post-communist countries have done. So this is the problem for me in Ukraine now. The role of Russia is of secondary importance, and I am very unhappy how this issue is misinterpreted in Western media. I definitely disagree with this misinterpretation. So what the Russians, the young Russians should do, well, I definitely don't want to give you any advice. That's not my ambition. But I think, and my experience tells me that it is a domestic issue of Ukraine, and it must be solved inside the country. It must be solved by negotiations, not by talking, not just by sending arms to one side or another. I have a unique experience. Some of you may remember that even if I was not a fan of dividing Czechoslovakia, I was, as Prime Minister, forced to be instrumental in dividing the country, and I understood it as my task to do it rapidly, peacefully, friendly, without any sort of violation. And I was always repeating to my colleagues in ex-Yugoslavia or ex-Soviet Union, I was always telling them, did you negotiate sufficiently? Didn't you say after one arrogant sentence from one politician or another, finito, I don't continue, let's go out, and the fighting starts. So I always ask the Yugoslav and Soviet Union politicians whether they did it that way. So my only recommendation is to talk to each other, negotiation, and not blaming someone for that he from outside introduced the whole conflict. So this is my story, and it's ridiculous. It's Monday morning, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Next Monday morning, exactly at that time, I will be speaking on hearings in the British House of Lords about Ukraine. So exactly a week from now, I will make a more fundamental speech about that issue.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much. Another question here? And so maybe the last, unless someone else has a question, another one afterwards.
أنا الأستاذ الدكتور محمود علي الداود. أنا رئيس قسم الدراسات السياسية في بيت الحكمة وسفير عراقي سابق. أولا أود أن أشكر فخامة الرئيس كلاوس على هذا البحث القيم، وأحب أن أنوه أن المنظمة التي أنتمي إليها وهي بيت الحكمة The House of Wisdom، والتي الآن في بغداد، هي في الأساس ساهمت مساهمة كبيرة في بناء النهضة الأوروبية الحديثة منذ العصور العباسية في بغداد قبل أكثر من 800 عام. كان بيت الحكمة جامعة عالمية يدعو إلى الحوار، وهذه المؤسسة ساهمت مساهمة كبيرة في بناء وأثرت على النهضة الأوروبية الحديثة. فإذا لكل جيل إيجابياته، لكل عصر إيجابياته وسلبياته. ما أحب أن أعلق عليه هنا ما تحدث عنه الرئيس كلاوس حول اكستريميزم. الحقيقة أن ما نشاهده حاليا من إسلامك يعني من تطرف ديني هو ليس إسلامي، وإنما هو الحقيقة هو خارج عن الإسلام. أود أن أقول بأن بلادي العراق تعاني الآن من مشكلة كبيرة جدا. هذه المشكلة قد تكون ناجمة عن بقايا تأثير الاستعمار في المنطقة الإسلامية. نحن الآن نجابه أكبر مشكلة في التاريخ الحديث، وهي قيام جماعة مسلحة من جيوش أجنبية تعمل على تحطيم الحضارة، تقوم بنهب المتاحف، تحطيم الجامعات، تحطيم البنية التحتية للأقطار الإسلامية. ولذلك هنا نحن نتوقع من العالم الغربي تعاطف من أجل معالجة هذه القضية التي ستؤثر بالتالي إذا لم تعالج الآن على العالم الغربي. وشكرا.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this.
If I may make a short comment, but it would need a long and serious discussion. Well, I must tell you that I was probably the only European head of state who disagreed in March 2003 with the U.S. attack on your country. You may know it. So, but my point is just methodological, not substantial. You mentioned Islam is not wrong or not responsible for something. I have not used the term Islam. I strictly differentiate the term Islam from Islamism. And Islamism is for me a very dangerous ideology which misuses probably the basic structure of the religion. So I always in Europe try to ask the speaker, are you talking about Islam or Islamism? Many people pretend that they don't understand this, for me, fundamental difference. So I think the same story is for me human rights versus human rightism, which is for me again a totally wrong ideology. To my great regret, the cornerstone of the whole idea of United Nations, and which I can't accept the Islamism, human rightism as an ideology. It doesn't mean that I am against human rights. So I suggest you to think about those along these lines to differentiate these issues.
Thank you very much for this, Mr. Klaus. So we're now going to the next to the first panel, and thank you. I would like the audience to give you an applause for your very nice comments. So we'll continue, have a great conference, and we'll be back.
excuse me, you will remain seated because we will start